Well, welcome back, everybody, to what is now our second broadcast of our podcast. The guys survived their last broadcast, the first time of being in a podcast studio, so well done, fellas. The podcast title is aptly entitled Filtering the Noise, and we hope to bring you some real nuggets and some great information in relation to the podcast that we'll be sending out. I'm here today with Richard, ATP Enable, and Ben Weston, but I'm going to allow them to just give you a little bit of an introduction to who they are and what they do.
Hi, thanks, Graham. I'm Richard. I'm the MD of ATP Enable. We focus on everything cellular, SIMs, IoT, and more importantly, working with Ben and the team at doing this securely.
And I'm Ben Weston, CEO and founder of Digital Inc., and we provide unique and exclusive secure SIMs into the IoT and cellular space.
So last time we were out, if anybody's listened to the first podcast, and if you've not, I would suggest that you do. We had some really exciting conversation about what these two fellows are doing in relation to getting involved with SIMs and what's the application benefit of that in the market. Last time we were here, we spoke about that impact onto IoT, the Internet of Things. This podcast is really quite serious and actually probably is more important than the IoT applications, because actually what we're here to talk about today is we're here to talk about protected SIMs, and we're here today to talk about how the products that these guys have developed, how it's really protecting the consumption of content that is inappropriate to age groups. And these guys are far better to talk about it than I am. But some of the statistics that they're going to share with you today are quite frightening. So let's hop over the fence. Let's start talking about this subject. Ben, first of all, just talk to me about when did you first become aware of this issue, and how that was really impacting what younger children were really consuming?
Really kind of originated from the birth of the whole digital inclusion process. So we're looking back at 2015, which is when the Prevent Duty came into play, July 2015, Section 26 of the Counter-Terror Act. What we realised is that as a government, if you're deploying a remit of digital by default, those that are digital excluded, and we're talking about connectivity here, or lack of device, need to be included. They need to be connected. So if a local authority or a borough or a central government unit wants to provide or wanted to provide connectivity to an organisation to allow those stakeholders that are excluded to become included, then they needed to be protected.
So they have a duty of care.
They do have a duty of care, but they have a mandate to actually adhere to Section 26 of the Counter-Terror Act. And that specifically says prevent people from gaining access of a radical ideology or extremist nature, to stop minors, to stop vulnerable adults from being dragged down a wormhole that is going to endanger them and the public at large.
But it's not only just counter-terrorism and radicalisation, is it? It's about younger people having access, and we were talking earlier around pornography and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's any content, is it, that's really not
but
appropriate?
That was the key driver at that moment.
At that time, right?
Yeah.
So we're almost entering, aren't we, a little bit of a perfect storm here. So where we see digital safety across computers, laptops, tablets, and mobile devices, and just how this has become a concerning issue over the last 10 years. Obviously, access to the internet and content across these devices is massively increasing, but then the access, and from the stats I know you've shared with me, is the audience is getting younger and younger and younger. Yeah. So we've got more devices that can connect, and we've got audiences that are looking material where they shouldn't do, and that's really accelerated over the last 10 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think certainly in the last 10 years I've kind of fallen into that demographic. So proud dad of 3 girls, 8, 7 and 4, they've all got iPads, and you very quickly understand their adaptiveness to have access to we were getting people calling saying someone's FaceTime me because we'd linked the iPads to the wife's phone. That they were calling grandparents at 7 o'clock in the morning when they get up. When if they're not looking after them, they don't really want that. But yeah, I've firsthand am dealing with this issue now. I pulled out some of the stats from Ofcom from last year's report from 2023 versus 15 years ago. And a couple of things really kind of highlighted for me. First of all, the age group of 3 to 4 was not even considered 15 years ago, where it is today. And the statistic about access for 3 to 4-year-olds is now higher than it was 15 years ago with 5 to 7-year-olds. And I mean, if we look at... they're saying now that 8 to 11-year-olds, 60% of them have their own connected device in which they can be within an isolated environment with no supervision, limited education about safety and those sorts of elements whilst being online. And not surprisingly, 97% now of teenagers 12 to 15 have access to their own device. So you're right, we've kind of created that access younger because we see the benefits, we see the unlimited online learning capabilities, but I don't think we've got in place the education or the training or the protection of whilst these kids are online.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, Ben, previously, we were just talking just a moment ago, weren't we, about this, what you were saying about this digital inclusion. But and the jurisdiction of local authorities to control what content is being consumed because they are guiding that. They're giving that connectivity, responsible for it. Well, but overall, let's put that to one side, shall we? And overall, though, connectivity for if you're just buying a contract with any of the airtime providers, where's the protectionism there? Where is that really being driven from? And is the technology in those SIMs to shut things down? And are parents ultimately getting that control?
Well, So the MNOs use BBFC filtering. So it's a database of sites that shouldn't be connected. In order to be prevent duty compliant, as if you were as safe as you are in school, in an internet connection, you need to be able to decrypt content, see specifically what that content is, and make sure the content is appropriate for the age group of the child with the connection.
Right.
The only way you can do that is to examine the content. So we can SSL decrypt IPv6 content, so HTTPS websites. So we can take a look at the content and say, right, that's denied, that's inappropriate. We can then create releases for staff. We can actually create allow and deny content types in terms of filtering. But you need that granular process to be regulatory compliant. But if we're talking about, so we've got regulatory compliance and we've got what is ethically correct here. Mm-hmm. Not protecting kids and yet giving them a device and saying, look, we're donating this SIM to you so you can get onto the internet, but it's your responsibility to make it safe.
It's passing the buck.
It is passing the buck. And it shouldn't be allowed. Now, I know the need 15 years ago or so, or 10, 15 years ago. The greater need was to get people on board. Okay, so, get them included. But now the de facto should be protected and included. Mm-hmm. They should be bonded together. That's what we do. And the other thing you need to do to make sure that if you are the organisation that are providing that connection, if you're providing a device and a connection, that SIM is still, it's a conduit, it's still a device. If they take that SIM out of a device that's protected and put it into an unprotected device, you still provided them the connection. And it's not good enough to say, well, the responsibility's on you.
Yeah.
Because the technology there is to have the right cellular SIM that will provide that protection and mitigate risk for the donor of that connection and give them an evidence-based report at the end of the month to say, this is what we did. It's about proving that you are protecting. Because of, you've got two things here. And again, bill shock. Now, obviously, if a device is capped on a tariff from a mobile operator that's actually provided a SIM, that's one thing. But if you're saying to a child, I'll give you 2 gig of data a month, and they spend it or utilize it on gaming.
It'd be gone in an hour.
It'd be gone in an hour. And I know then the donator or the operator will say, well, we gave you 2 gig. What we're trying to do is hone down a process here and say, the remit is every digitally excluded child should not be disadvantaged, or socio-economically digitally excluded child or family should not be disadvantaged to their peers. That's the statement.
So that's a responsibility of the state, we would say, or the local councils.
Because think about it ethically, and this is a very passionate play here, and I've been involved with it for years and years and years, and it does really get my back up. So the point here is, if you have a child that has no internet access or can only go to a library to get 20 minutes of internet access because you've got 5,000 people trying to gain the same 7 terminals, that's not the library's fault. It's not. But if you've got a stakeholder that doesn't have an internet connection and yet that child is incredibly bright or creative, or it doesn't matter if they're incredibly bright, they could be not incredibly academic. They have the right to try and achieve the best they can achieve to better their own lives. They shouldn't be hindered. It's a utility. How would you feel if you walked into a house and somebody said, you know what, yeah, it's great, but there's no gas and electricity, but you can live it. There's a torch. But when that battery runs out, you should use it responsibly.
So obviously, you guys are amplifying this into all the local authorities and councils and people that need to be aware of this.
Yeah.
What's the conversation like? Is it, yes, we know we've got to do this. What's the appetite? Is there massive? There's got to be massive appetite for this, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of growing roles for digital inclusion officers at the moment through a lot of local boroughs. We attend a lot of webinars, a lot of roundtables about this, and it's very relevant, it's very topical. But I think Ben made some really kind of poignant messages there that currently it's enough that we're trying to do something. A lot of it is donated recycled equipment, which is fine. Again, it's doing best endeavours with what you've got, but there becomes a point where it's not enough. And we've had many conversations before where the lesser of 2 evils sometimes is not to provide an unsecure access, because previously they weren't at risk. Because those that come from the disadvantaged socio-economic backgrounds are most likely to be coerced, most likely to be sextorted for images of themselves because they're potentially single-parent families or an unloved home or are very lonely in terms of their environment. So they're looking for that sort of engagement, and they can get that from the wrong type of people online. And as Ben mentioned as well about the education point of view as well, 84% of homework's now completed online. And I mean, my kids, TT Rockstars, Numberbots, all these, that they are learning, and without that ability to do that online, they are at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So things like the pupil premium grant, the different funding that's available now by central gov that's in place today, is possible to fund these sorts of projects to make this available and assist in an online learning process for those that can't afford it.
So I get all that. But where does it cross the divide? Because obviously you're providing SIMs within local authority frameworks, okay? And then we've got SIMs being put into devices that are outside of that. So families that can afford to do that, buy airtime contracts and things like that.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier, didn't we, about the responsibility of parents.
Yeah.
And I think there's some unbelievable stat that parents understand about putting safety controls and processes on their devices, but they don't do it.
Yeah, so 91% of adults are aware of safety features that are available through applications.
What's the percentage?
Settings.
91?
91, but only 31% of people actually do anything about it. So it's a worrying statistic. And when we talk about what the MNOs are doing in terms of the Vodafones, the E's, the O2s, a lot of it is about, it's educate the child, talk to them about what they're looking at online. And going to go hands up here, but who spoke years ago about their parents about watching things on the TV or sharing magazines as you did when it was my day? You didn't, and it's more accessible now online. We're creating a desensitised generation. The statistics about under 18 rapes on other under 18 minors are in worrying growth periods because the material they're being subjected to is considered mainstream. It's considered acceptable because they have the access to it at a very, very young age.
Do you believe it's becoming sort of the new normal in society? security? Is it, we've all come through an age where we remember when there wasn't the internet. Mm-hmm. I know I don't look that old, but but where you didn't have access to those types of things. And now, obviously, and especially that increase over the last 10 years, is it just becoming in society the new norm that that's just what happens? And have the standards dropped? One could say they have. Mm-hmm. And is that? And
well, they've been allowed to drop, haven't they?
Of course they have. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. The digital inclusion programs that so many local authorities, schools, you name it, actually put out there. They do fantastic work for skills provisioning, and they do everything they can do, bearing in mind the constraints and budget they've got. So this isn't a criticism of what they do and what they're attempting to do. It's not a criticism at all. It's an offer of a support process to make it even better and ethically correct, and to protect you as an organisation. If we were talking about civil aviation, we do work in civil aviation.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can be as an accountable manager, you can be criminally prosecuted if you're the one actually deciding what connection gets given, and if a threat were to derive from that connection, that unprotected connection. But getting back to schools and protecting minors and vulnerable adults, content and content type, the internet is an amazing place. Mm-hmm. It is an amazing place.
Of course it is. Yeah.
And there are so many fantastic things for us all of all ages to see. It's a very simple issue, but complex commercially to support. Mm-hmm. And that is sifting out all of those things that would endanger a minor, because we're talking about protecting minors, and vulnerable adults. The technology is there. Unfortunately, the commercials for the larger organisations work in opposition to that. You choke traffic, you lose income.
Yeah, there's been a lot of things that have happened over the recent years in terms of the technology adaptation, in terms of social media wouldn't be as prevalent if we were still stuck on 3G connectivity. The fact that you've got 4G and 5G now, and you've got autoplay videos on Facebook, and you've got constant engagement and algorithms in place to keep you engaged and keep you online, to increase market share, because not only they're looking at it daily, how much time each day they're spending on these social media apps. It's a concern. And I pulled up some stats, and for those under 25, they probably won't remember a time without it. I mean, mine certainly don't. But Facebook 2004, YouTube 2005, WhatsApp 2009, Instagram 2010. They've been around for under 20 years. And the worrying one for me was TikTok was only founded 8 years ago. And there was a recent Wall Street Journal article that I read that last year stated it's one of the biggest and fastest growing danger site for adult predators. Of the US TikTok audience, 135 million of they have subscribers in the US, 25% of them under 18. And it's the largest site for adult predators globally.
Wow. Ben, you've obviously spoken about your involvement with Number 10. Where are the people who are taking the responsibility about the law around this? And then we spoke about, obviously, anti-terrorism and things like that, and we've spoken about laws locking people down on that, and radicalisation, understand that. But is there any awareness, or do you have any awareness of where the next level of law is going to be written in relation to this, and those who are going to be responsible for that? Is there any movement on that?
There are. Okay, so there always will be, and there always has to be, because of what regulation has to do is adhere itself or align itself with an ever-present danger, and obviously there are new threats every day.
Yeah.
So you can say, in terms of regulation, depending on whether an SME, depending on whether you're a utilities company, or whether you're in education, regulation is there. It's a regime. It's something that should be ever present, that you adhere to. Period. The only time that people don't feel they need to adhere to it is if they think they don't have the budget for it.
Right. Okay.
To implement that, and then the only time they come unstuck or realise they really could be in the firing line is when they're in breach of something, And then, like with GDPR, you get a 5 or 10% penalty of your turnover, and it hits you in the pocket. And so that extra penny you might have saved on not buying a protected SIM has now cost you tens of millions of pounds.
So, picking up on a point you said earlier, what you're saying about budget, what you're saying about money. So, if you're choking content, then people aren't consuming it. If they're not consuming it, you're unable to bill people for that content. So, so what is this? Is this a degree of capitalism, of greed, in relation to people just want the income to still come in, and they're not really not taking ownership of it?
Yeah, and you can say that about any industry that's grown and grown and grown and growing.
Yeah,
and every organisation in the world, providing it's legal and ethical.
Yeah.
Has the right to be sustainable. So sustainable is the new soft touch word from 8 years ago, 7-8 years ago. You're allowed to make a profit. Without making a profit, you can't sustain the business and the service that people are buying from you. I get that. But we also there's got to be a balance about if you're talking about people that are vulnerable because of their age or their position, whatever the case may be. Those that aren't in that position, that are providing something for them, should take responsibility for giving them what they need to step up, to achieve what they have the potential to achieve, but without putting them in harm's way. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
It's either that or we're not sleeping at night.
Yeah, it's really funny. I feel quite angry listening to this today. I'm sitting there, I can feel myself getting quite angry about it.
It is a passionate play. It's a passionate play because it should be.
Yeah,
it should be.
Well, I'm reading a stat here, Richard. You gave this to me, and you said, worryingly, a recent report by the IWF stated sexual abuse imagery of primary school children. Yeah.
I don't honestly.
Is £1,000% worse since lockdown.
Yeah.
So since 2020.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Horrendous. Let's just focus back onto your SIM. So obviously your SIM goes into these devices.
Yeah.
So is it operating in the same way as the SIMs you're working with the internet, the IoTs?
Functionality is
so it will have access to multiple.
And we set a profile between the connectivity piece and the content piece to make it appropriate for the end user and the client, the organisation that's handing that across. So whether that's somebody working in a bank that's remote working, that they need that cellular connectivity, or whatever the case may be, the same functionality applies as it does to something we'll provide to a child. The difference is the profiles in terms of what we allow and what we deny and what we alert and what we evidence. We evidence everything on every log that comes through. So every transaction, every data transfer, MOMT, so mobile originating, mobile terminating, we look at and we log, we look at and we log, and we say yes, 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 no. No, that's an alert, no, and also all the yeses and all the no's are in a report, so we can say that your entire estate did this.
Yeah.
We don't know who Johnny is. We've got an ICC ID of a SIM. The school should know who Johnny is, or the library loan scheme, they will know who that user is. So if they feel on that device somebody tried to do something compromising, then we can alert, and we do alert the client, our client, and say, right, this is something for you now to take up, and say, right, you have evidence of that. You're not only protecting the user, you're protecting yourselves.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess, Richard, when you're talking about the sort of benefits of this, exactly, maybe the school or the college or the university or whoever it is you're reporting on can actually call parents in.
Yeah,
and you can. It's a difficult conversation, isn't it? And it's crossing a big line because going back to the Johnny scenario where you said, right, okay, we now know that Johnny's been online and he's been trying to access this.
With the right policy,
you need to, as parents, you need to be aware of this.
Yes.
Now, obviously, what they do about it,
make the parent aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Set them an alert.
Yeah, and this is, it's almost. I'm listening to you today, and I'm almost saying, well, actually, in relation to these SIMs and the devices that the local authorities are distributing, they're better controlled than the ones that are on the open market.
Oh yeah. It's a sea change. It's a new. It should be a new normal.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, should that be?
And that's
the
what
new
we're
normal?
striving for.
Yeah, but is this going to evolve? Sorry, Richard. Is this going to evolve into like a B2C model eventually?
Yeah, I think the application and the demand would be there.
I should say.
I think. Go back to your point as well about the whole Johnny situation.
Johnny doesn't exist, by the way. He probably does somewhere.
Johnny Terry.
I don't know Johnny.
For GDPR reasons, Johnny does not exist.
But it's only in place for ethical reasons. Yeah. So we're not there to be Big Brother and we want to report and see everything that you've been looking at because I want to be nosy as a parent to find out everything that you've done. All it's going to pick up is the trigger and the denies based on the age-appropriate content. Yeah. So what someone can see at 16 is very different to what someone can see
content,
at 5.
Not URL content.
Yeah. It's content type. And that could be... and we speak regularly and think, what a horror story. You've got pro-anorexia, pro-suicide. There are teenagers out there consuming untold amounts of data about pro-suicide. And it's the algorithms of the corporate that keep delivering that information because based on their history, that's what they've looked at. And it's resulting in the death of teenagers. And it's just worrying. And it's not only for minors, although it's very applicable for the under 18s. A lot of our project discussions now within enterprise is from a mental health and awareness point of view with a corporate enterprise. Working from home, isolated, live on your own, gambling problem, food addiction, all sorts of other triggers that we can pick up on and alert HR to go, have you realised that Karen's got a gambling problem and she's been trying to get on Bet365 for the...
Inline keyword detection.
Yeah.
How do I harm myself?
Yeah.
If the phrasing comes up, great, we have an alert.
Yeah.
And then what we can do is we can push a page that says, right, if you're feeling like this, reach out here, here, and here. And then we have an alert, not for us to act on other than making sure we've informed the right administrators within the organisation for them to reach out in the most appropriate way.
Yeah, really interesting, guys. And it's been... quite a serious topic to talk about this morning, and I really want to thank you for your input. In the coming podcast, we're going to have some really interesting guests who have been around this on protection and digital inclusion, and again, I'm sure they're going to have some really interesting things to talk about. But for today, I'd like to thank Richard, Ben. Thanks very much for your input today. It's been really good. And until next time, we'll see you soon.